guys, it's Quana back again with another video. Hope you guys are doing awesome and having a great year. So today I'm going to be reviewing The Color Purple. This 2023 rendition is a reimagining of the Broadway musical. The Broadway musical is a reimagining of the 1985 film directed by Steven Spielberg, which is an adaptation of the 1981 novel by Alice Walker. Just so that we're clear, this movie is not a remake of the 1985, but it is a reimagining of the musical. Directed by Blitz Bazawule and starring Fantasia, Taraji P. Henson, Danielle, Colman, Domingo, Corey Hawkins, Halle Bailey, Phylicia, Mpasi, and a host of amazing and incredible other talent on the screen. This movie musical brings to life the story of Celie, a young girl growing up in rural Georgia in the early part of the 20th century. And it tells the story of her hardships in her life and how she grows into her identity. Even though it takes the course of a lifetime, one might look at this film as a coming-of-age story. But before I go into my thoughts around this film, let's revisit the novel and the 1985 movie, all of which I revisited in preparation for seeing this movie. The Color Purple, which was written and published in 1981, won Alice Walker the Pulitzer Prize in 1982. That was a good year, y'all. That was a good year. Snaps in 1982. This novel tells the story of Celie, who later becomes Celie Johnson. She is a young girl growing up in rural Georgia, and at the age of 14, she is pregnant with her second child by her father. Her mother dies, and she is tasked with helping to raise her younger siblings, most importantly, her younger sister, Nettie, who she's incredibly close to. Nettie is smart and intelligent and goes to school, and because of this she's a little bit protected from the abuse of her father, but that all soon comes to an end when Celie is veritably almost sold off to be married to a man by the name of Mr., whose name we don't come to know until much later in the book. He initially was courting Nettie, but because Nettie's father wanted her to go off to school, he gave Mr. Celie instead. And Celie was not known for her looks, and because she had been spoiled twice, this was considered a downgrade from Mr. He takes her home to help raise his children and clean his house and almost just basically be a maid and a housekeeper for him. And he's incredibly abusive as well. Nettie soon realizes that home will not be safe or peaceful for her, and she shows up at the door of her sister. But that stay is short-lived when Mr. tries to take advantage and accost her. He then throws her off the property and vouches that they will not see each other again, and it is nearly a lifetime before they are able to. Throughout the course of the novel, we see Celie struggle first in her literacy, and she eventually learns to read and teaches herself to read, building on the skills that her sister taught her. And then we see her meet women in her life who give her the strength and expound on a lot of the lessons that her sister tried to pass on, like fighting back, which we see through the character of Sophia, who later becomes her daughter-in-law, and through the character of Shook Avery, who is actually the mistress of her husband, and later on develops a romantic relationship with Celie as well. And it's over the course of her life where she learns to finally fight back and stand up for herself. And through that, she eventually building her own identity, becoming a businesswoman, going out on her own and being able to stand up for herself, that life gets better for her. There's a lot of reconciliation in the novel, both with Mr., who we uncover his own past abuse by the hands of his father, this cycle of abuse and repression that he had that caused him to become this abusive man. We see reconciliation between her stepson Harpo and his ex-wife, and we see reconciliation when Celie and Nettie are able to come together again at the end of the book, and surprisingly she's able to reunite with her children who she thought were dead. Again, this novel won Alice Walker a Pulitzer Prize, but it wasn't met with full accolades. There was a lot of backlash, particularly from the African American community and the NAACP, who felt as though it painted men in a very negative light. I feel as though in that time period where we were just very hyper fixated on image and projecting a positive image in the popular culture of Americana so that we could be accepted, people glossed over and just looked at these characters as stock characters or stereotypes and really didn't look at the messaging of the novel. I don't feel as though when you reread the novel, especially with fresh eyes, and I've read the novel quite a few times, first in high school, again in college, and later on as a teacher. And again, I read it again in preparation for this video. There's a lot of reconciliation and a lot of discussion or underlying messaging around the idea of abuse being cyclical. And so almost every male character, with the exception of the man who we know as Celie's father, gets a redemption arc in some way, shape, or form, even Mr. When it was later adapted by Steven Spielberg, who actually, if I'm not mistaken, the lore behind all this is that he was almost hand selected by Quincy Jones, who was brought on to do the music, to do this film, to direct this film. And that's a big deal because, of course, he was a white man directing this film, and it was his first major dramatic film. And it has gone on to become iconic. It wasn't iconic, though, when it came out. It was also boycotted and backlash. It was nominated for 11 Academy Awards and did not win a single one, which, if you look back at the year of 1985 and you see the films that won against it, yeah, it should have at least won 5 of those. I'm sorry. The score alone by Quincy Jones was immaculate and amazing. The direction by Steven Spielberg was amazing as well. He has gone on, of course, to become iconic. He was still a very much developing director in 85, and since then has definitely earned his place on like the Mount Rushmore of directors. So there's that, and I would definitely say, hands down, looking back at the films from that year, that there's a good argument for Oprah Winfrey and Whoopi Goldberg to have won in their categories. And so it's really disheartening when you see a film of that magnitude and it really walked away without anything. And for a long time, there weren't any films, Black films, that were being recognized by the Academy after that film. And there's a lot of discussion in hindsight about how much of that was because of like the vitriol and the negative press around it, that they just didn't want to get involved with that. They're like, there's just too much negativity around it. We don't want to get our hands muddy with this. But yeah, it was very well liked, mostly by critics. Siskel and Ebert, I think, both gave it favorable reviews. It's become one of my favorite films growing up. It was a film that I'd seen from a young child, so I was probably somewhat desensitized to the trauma of the film, but I've since watched it ad nauseum. I teach it almost every year in my film and literature class, and I'm at the point now where even though most movies don't make me cry, I cry almost every single time that I watch the movie, and I come away with something new every time. Like recently, in the past few years, I've had students who pointed out to me the various like diegetic sounds that are used to kind of like leitmotifs. Leitmotif is a sound that's associated with characters or with moments in a movie. And so you have these kind of like bells or wind chimes that are always associated with Nettie or with Suge. With any time that Celie has hope, you hear these sounds. You hear it in the song that plays at the beginning. You hear it whenever the mail truck comes. There's bells that are on the truck and you hear them tinkling every time it comes. And of course, this every time we see this in the movie, you know, Celie's heart swells with hope that she's going to get a letter from her sister. Later, we kind of hear a similar sound with the wind chime that is on Suge's bed when her and Celie first kind of had their first romantic encounter. And then those same wind chimes are hanging up on Celie's house at the end of the movie when we again hear those bells, and those bells are now bringing her sister back to her. Oh my gosh, the student who pointed that out to me, and I had never really paid attention to it because I've seen the movie so much, but seeing it with fresh eyes and picking up on that and having taught that lesson, they were able to pick up on that. And it just completely altered my brain chemistry on how I view that movie, how much hope is actually in that movie, that I think sometimes we only associate it with the negative stereotypes. There are people literally to this day who cannot stand Danny Glover because of this movie. Every time they see him, they're like, I hate you for what you did to Celie. But we don't really see his redemption arc in the same way that it plays out in the book. Fast forward to the early 2000s, and Oprah Winfrey acquires the rights to, along with Quincy Jones and Steven Spielberg, to back a Broadway production. It becomes critically acclaimed. It gets nominated for several Tony Awards. It wins a Best Actress Tony for the actress who originated the role of Celie on Broadway, LaChance. And of course, the song I'm Here becomes iconic. It becomes even more iconic when Fantasia Barrino is then later cast in the role of Celie. And of course, there's been a slew of other actresses attached to this project. Everyone from Heather Headley, who did a great job as Suge, to Jennifer Hudson. Danielle Brooks starred as Sophia on Broadway as well. And of course, Danielle Brooks, if you're not familiar with her, you might be familiar with her work in Orange is the New Black because she played the character of Tasty, who was one of the most beloved characters on the show, aside from Poussey. And so when I saw the trailer, I did react to the trailer and I was so excited. I definitely knew right away that it was going to be an adaptation of the Broadway musical, not a remake of the 85 film. And let's be honest, even when we argue about remakes being made, very rarely are they full-on remakes. Most often they are reimaginings. And the purpose of a reimagining is to elevate the filmmaking of an original film, either through CGI, through costuming, through corrective casting, through making a message stronger, things of that nature. Very rarely are you going to ever, I think, see a remake of something that is as classic as the 85 adaptation. It's still, cinematography wise, it still holds up to this day. It is still a phenomenal movie. You can go back and watch it to this day and still get so much out of it and still have such an incredible movie going experience. And the acting is still so strong that I don't think we'll ever get a full remake of that. But I do think that reimaginings can be good because it does force us to look back. And we're living in a day and age where that movie is almost 40 years in the making. I was 3 when it came out. We're not going to talk about that. I was almost 3 when it came out. And so that film is almost 40 years in the making. And there's a generation of people who haven't seen it, who haven't been introduced to it. Every year that I teach it, by and large, my classes are small, but by and large, maybe one student out of my 6 or 7 students has seen the movie before me showing it in class. So it's a movie that not everyone sees, not everyone introduces their family members to. And because so many people do associate it with trauma, people are reluctant to do rewatches, even though it's become so beloved. I mean, literally, let's be honest, Tyler Perry has literally based half of Medea's dialogue from this movie, especially in his stage play days. This was a huge source of inspiration for him. So for it to be so many people's favorite movie, there certainly is a lot of vitriol for this movie, for perhaps the way it has been handled by Hollywood, for the fact that the original director was a white man, even though he is arguably the best director our generation. If you're living today, he is still one of the best, if probably not the best. Just go back to his filmography. I think you can't argue with how good Steven Spielberg is as a director. So while certainly a Black director could have done more, we know what it was. We definitely know that Black directors in 1985 were not being given the budgets necessary to make A Color Purple. Back in 1985, the budget was $15 million to make that movie. And that was a lot, of course, in 1985. That's nothing now. And there's no way that we would see that kind of budget to be able to get that type of authenticity that you get in that film in that day and age. And that's sad. That is a sad state for the world to have been in 1985, but it is a true fact. And so I think we can't take away from the artistry. You know, if Oscar Micheaux was still alive, the director who the Oscars is named for, yeah, I think he could have done it. There's not a ton of directors from the 1970s who were able to flourish and develop their craft in such a way that I think could have gotten the movie that we got. And that's a hard thing to say, but I think that is a true thing to say. But that is not the case anymore. Now we have really a surge of directors, Black directors, who are finally getting the tools in hand to make quality films, to hone their craft, to become great. And I think Blitz Bazawule, who is the director of this rendition and also directed Beyonce's Black is King, is a great director and a great director to bring to life a musical. That said, I'm almost big brain interested in what this movie could have looked like if there were like a mix between Blitz Bazawule and Ava DuVernay doing this film together, because cinematography wise and eye wise, Ava DuVernay knows how to film a movie beautifully. Blitz does as well, especially when it comes to like colors and lushness and movement. So I think that would have been an interesting pairing. But nonetheless, I don't want to go too far down that rabbit hole because I don't want to take away from the wonderful work that we got in this movie. So if you've made it to this point in the video, hope you are enjoying the conversation. Hit the subscribe button and let's just keep on deep diving into this rendition of the movie. Which is a reimagining of the Broadway musical. I actually had an opportunity to see the stage play with the touring company in Durham, and I never can remember the year. I feel like it was 2010, but I don't honestly remember the year. I have to ask my friend the Shire if she remembers what year it was that we went to go see that movie, or excuse me, that play. And it was stunning. It was stunning, and it was amazing, and it was gorgeous, and it was superb. The music. But it was really hard for me to get into the play then, and my memory of it is very hazy. That being said, the only trepidation I had going into this version was with Taraji, and I will admit, that was me not having done my homework, because I've never watched I Can Do Bad All By Myself all the way through. So I did not remember her singing in that. I do, of course, remember her iconically singing It's Hard Out Here for a Pimp from Hustle and Flow. And so I was really just concerned and also a bit ageist, because Taraji is 53 now. So at filming, she was at least 51. And the age gap between her and Fantasia is a large age gap, and I never saw them as having that large of an age gap in the original. In my mind, she was probably only 7 or 8 years older than the character of Celie, at least the character of Suge was. But then I had to remember something going back to the book, because we're never really told Suge Avery's age, if I'm not mistaken, but we are told Celie's age, and it is definitely not common in her world. She is definitely looked down on by members of the community because of how young she is. Now, there were other young girls marrying. Her father in the book went on to marry another young girl, but it is assumed that that young girl was still older slightly than Celie and very overwhelmed. Her name was, she was from Gray, I think is what they say, a girl from around Gray is what they say in the movie and in the book. We don't find her exact age, but I was always picturing her as being like maybe 17. Celie at 14, having had 2 children, it was like, whoa, this is not common for most of the women in the book. I think Sophia was like 18 when she gets pregnant by Harpo. So just to kind of juxtapose that a little bit, it was never clear to me what the age gap was between Shug and Celie, but I did not think it would be roughly 14 years, which is the age gap between Taraji and Fantasia. But then I had to also remember that there's an age gap because Fantasia is playing Celie, and she comes in playing Celie, and Celie at that point is supposed to be about 26 at the point where we get the transition of Fantasia playing her. And so that is also a big age gap, and certainly Fantasia does not look 26 anymore. She looks like a grown woman, a beautiful grown woman, okay, but a grown woman nonetheless. I'm not going to spoil everything about the movie, so you do not have to worry about that, because I want as many people as possible to put eyes on the movie. But I want to reiterate, as I am going to several times in this video, that this movie is a musical. Daisy's going to be singing from beginning to end. It's going to be singing. It's going to sing at the beginning. It's going to sing at the end. And there are little sprinklings of dialogue along the way, but they are singing, okay? So I think first and foremost, it has to be said that the cast of this is stellar. There are a couple of recasts that I am not 100% okay with, but by and large, everyone in the main cast, spot on, 10 out of 10. From Fantasia, Taraji, Danielle, Brooks. You're going to hear her name a lot said during award season, so just go ahead and get used to it. Not to say that Taraji and Fantasia do not deserve their flowers as well. They certainly do. But I definitely think that, and as always was, that when Sophia's character is on the screen, you notice her, you pay attention, your attention is diverted away. She's very dynamic and charismatic, and even in the book she's written that way. I actually had to go, when I went back and read, I was like, wow, Sophia was a whole baddie. Like, Celie talks about Sophia like Sophia is a whole baddie. She admires Sophia so much. From how she walks into the juke joint, haven't had babies, more babies than they allude to in the movie and in the book. She didn't have quite a few babies. In the movie, they do a better job. The babies kept coming. They talk about the babies kept coming in between the fights. The babies kept coming. In the musical, they only kind of allude to like one baby, but they had some babies. Okay, there was some babies. She has like five babies in total, and one on the way with Henry Broadnax was his name. He's a prize fighter. But yeah, Sophia's a baddie. And so Danielle Brooks steals the show. David Alan Grier is in this, and he plays Shug Avery's father. I think that it is, again, we go back to the ages a little bit just to say that I think it's a little difficult casting someone who is not that much older than the actress playing the daughter as the father, because he's a preacher. He's a man in this world. It's definitely not the same thing where the women were marrying so young. The men were not necessarily marrying quite as young. They were establishing themselves in their world. So I did not love that casting, but more than that, I just thought that if you've ever seen Les Miserables, there are the characters of the Thénardiers, and they are kind of like the comic relief characters where they're mean and horrible, villainous people, but we're not supposed to take them seriously. They're supposed to be somewhat comical in nature. And that is how Shug Avery's parents kind of show up in this movie. And I think the problem in that is that this is Shug's main primary motivation. Like, she didn't talk about missing her babies nearly as much in the book, in the movie from 85, or in this. She rarely talks about having had children. What does she talk about? Her daddy. She has daddy issues. She wants to be reunited with her daddy. She wants her daddy to accept her. She wants her daddy, ergo maybe the church, maybe symbolic of the church, to see that even though she is this wild child, she is this woman who has loose morals, has accepted her own sexuality, has made a name for herself, is doing her own thing, is not adhering to the patriarchal rules of society. At the end of the day, sinners have soul too. She can love God too. She can have God inside her too. And so her father represents that for her. And because that's her motivation, seeing him as kind of like this somewhat comical character just feels a little, and he plays a very similar character of Reverend, if I'm not mistaken. He was in They Clone Tyrone, playing a very similar figure. So it just was a bit of a miscast for me. And if they were gonna go with someone who is younger, but they could have perhaps aged up to play that role, I would have loved to have seen, I'm going to forget his name right now, but I'll try to remember to put it on the screen. The actor who played the role of the genie on the Broadway version of Aladdin, that guy, I can't remember his name right now, but he, I think, would have been great. Or better yet, I mean, is there a reason why they couldn't get David Mann to play this character and have David Mann and Tamela Mann be married in the movie? We've already seen David Mann play, he played his wife's daddy for most of the Medea movies. So he certainly could have played Taraji's daddy. He's got the vocals for it. I don't know health-wise if there's a reason why he couldn't play it, but I almost would have rather seen him play that character. There's a cameo in this, and I'm not going to tell you who it is. If you've seen the movie, don't you say anything in the comments. There's a cameo in this, and I love this person dearly. This person is near and dear to my heart. But over the years, I feel as though they have lost that je ne sais quoi, that thing when they're able to remove themselves from a role and be more than just themselves. And all I could see was them in this movie. And that made it very hard for me to connect with that scene. It took me out of that moment a whole lot, and it's a very important moment in the movie. Aside from that, those are the main things that I would say were like miscast for the movie. Halle Bailey. If you've ever been to this channel before, I am a Chloe and Halle fan. I am a Halle Bailey supporter. I will support that girl until the wheels fall off. That is my good niece in my mind. But she really exuded hope and joy into this movie and is the beacon of hope for Celie's character, and was the perfect casting in my opinion because she exudes that. Because we already have all these hopes and dreams attached to her as Halle, and then because of just who she is and how she lived the screen. And it's so interesting because she actually does have a great deal of versatility. If you've ever seen her in Grownish, the character that she plays in Grownish is very sassy, very witty, very sarcastic, very snarky. For her to go to these characters that have so much love and light and joy in them, and she, not to say she doesn't have that in Grownish, but my girl has got some range. She's got some range. I definitely hope that she gets an Oscar nom for her song. I hope she walks away from the Oscars for something. I feel like in my mind, for the Oscars to redeem themselves, for Beyonce not winning for Be Alive and giving it to Billie Eilish for that Bond song, which all follows the same leitmotif anyway. And Phineas is a bomb writer, but that was not the win he should have gotten. What he should have gotten was a win for Town, we're not going to go down that path. That's a whole different diversion. Needless to say, Beyonce should have won for Be Alive, but she didn't. So my girl Halle should win this year. Halle should win this year for a song. I'm sorry, she should. But yeah, that's what I have to say about the actors. Let's talk about the music. The music is amazing. stream and listen to the soundtrack. It is amazing. There's fewer songs than this and in the Broadway, but guys, we have to keep in mind that Broadway plays are typically 3 hours or 3 hours and 30 minutes long. There is a whole behind intermission. You go into a Broadway musical at 8 o'clock and you will not get out until after 11, okay? There's an intermission. They had to cut some of those songs. Also, this is still a movie. It's not just strictly a musical. So there has to be moments of dialogue and moments where the film can breathe. And because of that, we lost some songs. Now, I was shocked to see that the runtime on this is shorter than the runtime for the 85 version. So that begins the question of, could we have benefited from additional like 15 more minutes? And I think we could have. Now, one thing that narratively this film, there's a lot of differences. Okay, there's a lot of differences between this and between the 85 film, and you're going to get that. There's a lot of stuff that they cut out. They build up the relationship between Celie and Nettie more in this before she marries Mr. than in the 85 version. We see them very briefly in the 85 version, and then she gets married off. We spend much more time together with them, which I think was so important to really establish that relationship, because they don't show the scenes, they don't show as much time with them together, because guys, in the movie, it kind of feels as though Nettie was at Celie and Mr.'s house for maybe like a week or more. She was not at their house that long in the book. So that is where, in many ways, the play and this version kind of get it right. It is not a lot of time that she's there. So she did not have a long period of time. But in the movie, they make it seem like it's a long period of time that we're there together to build that relationship up before they're torn apart. Did I mention Dion Cole as the daddy? Unrecognizable. Kudos to Dion Cole. Book that man for more dramatic performances, please. And then I think where we could have used that time a bit more is once we get to the part where Celie is reading Nettie's letters, we don't see much of Africa at all. And I do feel as though that was the part where we could have seen more of that. Because much more of this story focuses on the relationship between Celie and Shook. For good reason, they are focusing way more on the romantic aspects of them, which the book does. Guys, I'm going to go ahead and stop you right there. If you got a little attitude about them kissing, they were doing a whole lot of more than kissing. Y'all must have not read the book in school and forgot about Celie talking about Shook acting like she was one of Celie's little babies, nursing on her. And then she becomes a little baby too. Y'all forgot that part. But I'm going to just let you know right now, they were doing a lot more than just that one little kiss scene in the 85 movie. Here, they don't really show that much either. But you get more of their like buildup of them being in love with each other. So narratively speaking, I do think that the 15 minutes would have been beneficial. I think it needed more of that, more storytelling. But I do think that this movie showcases Mr.'s redemption more. It showcases the beautiful love between Harpo and Sophia a bit better, which was beautiful. Shout out to Corey Hawkins playing Harpo. Oh, that man, every time he shows up on the screen, he does phenomenal. Since who knows when we're going to see who we thought were going to be our new person that we could kind of like, we can't really rest our, pause, we can't rest our hat on anybody, okay? Because we saw what happened with Jonathan. But Corey Hawkins been that dude. And I'm just happy to see it. I'm happy to see it all around. Cinematography-wise, choreography, Fatima Robinson does it again. Y'all know we've been knowing Fatima for a long time, since back in the day when she was choreographing all of the music videos. She was choreographing Aaliyah. Praise God that she managed to survive. Who knows the therapy that she had to go through for surviving that. But she does it again. Breathtaking choreography in this movie. 10 out of 10. There is a clip that they left out that they posted online, and I'm like, I will be buying the DVD so that I can see a director's cut of this. If they do not release a director's cut of this, I am going to physically somebody, okay? What am I missing? Yeah, I do think that there were some narrative shortcomings just because it expounds on Act 1. Act 2 is a little choppy in some parts because some things we get so much more of her imagination that she's going through as kind of a retreat from the abuse that she's encountering. And so because of that, we do miss a couple of beats. And also, if you're not familiar with the book, but you're only familiar with the movie, it's going to feel narratively choppy because you're so used to the way that the movie 85 version tells the story, and this tells it in a different sequence. And most of those sequences are actually correct, but because the movie was done more narratively in a way that kind of made more sense at the time, they felt like would make more sense for audiences, it's going to throw you off a little bit. So you really cannot compare the two. But I do think that there were some narrative beats. I would have liked to see a little bit more about Squeak's story. In the book, Squeak's name is Mary Agnes. Celie encourages her to make people call her Mary Agnes instead of Squeak, so they'll take her seriously. She does for a time, and then she loses herself, and then she comes back to herself. That's a beautiful arc to kind of go along with what's happening with Celie. They do show Celie showing up at the jail. Celie in the book is really there for Sophia, and their relationship is so beautiful in the book. And I do think that we get that beautiful moment in the 85 movie version at Christmas time, but it's also incredibly heartbreaking. Like that is the part where I cry probably the most, is that scene in the store where she's helping Sophia to shop. And I do think that having it at the jail cell here at least shows us that she's not alone through that time. We also get to, of course, see Harpo show back up for her. Like, that's his wife. He not abandoning her. And so I love that. But I do wish that we had gotten, like, Suge's husband basically disappears in the musical. And so I kind of wish we had gotten more about what happens to him. So I will say that casting wise, I would give the casting a 9 out of 10 because I had a couple of changes, but most of it, the casting director, for those of you who've been with me for a while and follow me through my This Is Us, is the same casting director who cast for This Is Us, which is why the casting for young Celie, Phylicia, Mpasi, and Fantasia is so spot on. It's why the casting of Halle Bailey and Sierra, even though she's not in the movie for very long, is so spot on. And then they even gave Sierra Halle Bailey's mole so that there's that commonality, because it's the same casting director who cast it for This Is Us. So kudos to her. I would give the storytelling elements of this, I'm going to give them an 8 out of 10. I think it was moments where it was a little bit choppy. Musically, I'm going to give it a 9 out of 10. I do think there were a couple of songs that were cut that were more memorable, and I'm going to have to go back and watch this several times before I'm able to like fully quote all the songs. But I will say this, Halle Bailey's song is definitely going to get repeat. Of course, I'm here anytime Fantasia opens her mouth to sing, I'm here. I am here for it. A lot of people prefer Cynthia Erivo's version. I do feel as though Cynthia Erivo has a more Broadway tone, and so it's more elocution and more eloquent in many ways. But I feel as though Fantasia's version comes from a very similar lived experience, and it's Southern girls from North Carolina, and I resonate with her version more as a Southern girl from North Carolina, that I prefer her version over Cynthia Erivo's. And Push the Button. Push the Button. We're going to remember Push the Button, okay? Push the Button. So song-wise, definitely I'm going to give songs like 10 out of 10. Maybe not 9 out of 10. We'll give it a 9 out of 10. Overall, I would give this movie a ranking of like a 9.2 out of 10. It's definitely an A. It's a solid A. There are some things that could have been slightly better, but I do think that this was like a cinematic feat. It was rejoicing. It was joyful. I do think that, as in many ways, I could be wrong, but I feel as though Colman Domingo as Mr. was more abusive to Celia's character in this version than than Danny Glover's version was. But I feel as though it's lifted more because you have a tone shift. I will say that the score in the 85 version, that those leitmotifs stay so similarly that even though you still have the same notes of like Celie escaping with Suge, getting her own store, getting her house back, finding out what she finds out about her family life, all those things happen for her that are joyful, tonally, you don't really get a break from her life and knowing that things are going to work out for her until literally the very end. And I think the change in this movie is that you get to feel that feeling for longer. So this movie feels lighter in a lot of ways, because I think that this is one of those movies that it's for us to celebrate and rejoice and be joyful. These aren't, this narrative of like, these are the movies Hollywood wants to see. I think, we support the Broadway play. We support the stage play when it goes on tour. So I think this is a movie that we want to see. I think that it was important because if nothing else, it makes us go back and look at what we came from and how this story has evolved in our culture and how it lives as this like iconic film for us. And now you have options. Now you have options between whether you watch the 85 version or whether you watch this, or whether you don't watch either, whether you read the book, or whether you just say the whole thing's not for you. I do think we do have to fight for more films that tell other stories as well, but I thought that this was glorious. It was beautiful. I think pay these people their things, run the numbers up so that the next time all of these people are going and they're negotiating new contracts for new films, they can say, I was in The Color Purple, which grossed $750 million above its budget. They can be able to say that they did that, and then they can be able to navigate for more, and they can begin to fight for what they deserve, and we can get more movies made that we really want to support and see. But let me know down below in the comments, have you seen The Color Purple yet? Do you plan to see it? I will say I do think you need to see it in theaters, but definitely gauge if you want a theater experience that is going to be like very talking back to the screen. Then see it when it's packed, and see it in areas where you're around a lot of brown people, because that's what we're going to do. But if you want a quieter movie experience, then go see it when it's not as many people at the theater if you can. I'm going to go see it again because my first experience was a little bit more talking back to the screen, and so there are parts that I missed that I really want to soak in more. So I'm going to try to go see it again on my own. But let me know in the comments if you've watched it, if you plan to watch it, what you think about it. Happy New Year to you guys, and I will see you guys in the next video. Toodles!